So let's look in detail at the pentatonic scale. The pentatonic scale is, as I said, just 5 notes, so it's a really easy reservoir of notes to keep track of. It's just 5, right? There is, however, a few things that we need to know to use them correctly. And once you open your ears up to the fact how pentatonics in major and minor are used correctly, you're going to hear a lot of improper use, because a lot of folks know a couple of shapes and they know where the roots are, but they don't really know where it develops, and they don't really understand the difference between major and minor. So my goal is to really iron all of that out and give you a solid foundation. And there's a little bit of theory that we're going to go into, and there are 2 handouts for you for this segment. And I'd invite you to take a look at the one that has the piano score on top. Now, the reason why I use the piano score to demonstrate some things is because on the piano we can see things a little bit easier sometimes. On the bass you have that challenge that one and the same note can be played a bunch of places on the bass, and then sometimes it's a little bit hard to see things, how they relate in theory. So there's this chart that'll have a little bit of piano keys on there, and they'll hopefully help illustrate how the major pentatonic and the minor pentatonic are linked together. When you take a major scale, let's take a C major scale. That's a 7-note scale, diatonically speaking. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. Now we're going to take the 2 notes that can potentially create some tension. We're going to kick those out of the family, and that's the 4th and the 7th scale degree. They form with each other something that's called a tritone, which is a super hip interval that we can do a lot of stuff with, but in the pentatonic scale, we do completely without it. So in the C major scale, we take out F and B. Should you ever forget, remember this, you take out fish and bananas, okay? Fish and bananas in C major. And there you have your pentatonic scale. Now on the bass, I like to do things in G, just because the way G major lies on the bass, it's like a very comfortable position, usually in an area where we know our notes really well. So we're gonna take this whole thing into G major. That's the G major pentatonic without the 4th and the 7th scale degree. So there you have it. And take a look at the handout where this particular scale is described with little dots on the piano keys. Now, if I start, this is my note reservoir, okay? Those are the 5 chips I get to play with, no others. Now, if I take that reservoir of notes and relate it to the note that's a minor third below my root, which is the low E, another reason why I like to use G major as a starting point. Now, if I take that, if I declare that note the root, we have the E minor pentatonic. So major and minor are related. If you look on this on your sheet, below the piano score, you see the bass laid out. And in my diagrams, you can see, you'll see numbers, you'll see round dots, and you'll see square dots. And the square dots are the root. And the numbers are sometimes the fingerings and sometimes the scale degrees. In this particular case, I noted out the scale degrees so that you can really take a look at how every single note within that scale relates to the root, okay? So the square root in G major obviously is going to be our 2 Gs that are in the lower side here. And then when I go all the way up, there's another G. So if I wanted to play this over 2 octaves, there you have it. There are your 3 Gs. Now, if I do the same thing with minor, all I'm going to do is start on E and play the same notes. And I'm just going to go up to E. So that's the relative major and minor relationship. One more thing I'd like to add, and please take your second handout out, where you see the major and minor relationship. That's the relative relationship, when I have the same notes, but a different starting point. Now, also what we should mention on the relative minor, now that I'm starting from E, the individual relationships within the scale to the root are going to change. So instead of having 1 major second, major third, 5th, major 6th, and octave, I'm now going to count starting from my E, and the note relationships are going to be E, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7, and the root. Okay? Very crucial to know the shapes and very crucial to know how the shapes relate to the root. Now, I have a G major pentatonic here on your sheet and an E minor pentatonic here on your sheet. Let's listen to what the G minor pentatonic sounds like, because that shares the root with the G major, but it has a different reservoir of notes. So here's your G major pentatonic, and here is your G minor pentatonic. Again, with the scale relationships of root, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7, and then again the root. Okay, that's called the parallel relationship. If they share the root but not the rest of the notes, well, they share one, they share the fifth. But other than that, only the G and the D are the two only notes I can find in both of those scales. So that's called the parallel relationship. Parallel major, parallel minor. And relative major and relative minor is going to use the same reservoir of notes, same shape, but the root is different. So let me give you an example of the major tonality and the minor tonality. Basically, I'm going to be using the exact same scale, but the background track on the first track is going to be relating to a major chord progression, and the second track is going to be a minor-based chord progression. Plus, I'm also going to be ending on the root, G and E respectively, so that you can hear that even though, again, I'm using the same notes, but I'm relating those notes to either the major or the minor tonality. All right, let's go. Here we start with the major. So on this one I ended in G major, and now let's do the same thing. I'm using the same 5 notes, but the tonality of this background track is minor, and I'm going to end in E. So again, we were using the same 5 notes. The first example was relating to the G major. The second example was relating to the E minor. We're using the same 5 notes, but the tonality becomes clear by the context of how we use it.